This Part 3 video on obscure EU lore is an extremely long time overdue, and I apologize for that. I released Part 1 of this series back on September 27th, and did a Part 2 that was a little different than Part 1 on December 2nd, as Part 2 was not on obscure lore, but obscure out-of-universe media in the EU. I promised a third part in the style of Part 1 that was coming really soon in the Part 2 video, and I had indeed worked on it, with plans to release it shortly. But I inevitably would forget about it, with all the other projects I had going on at the time. I put it on the back burner, and completely forgot about Part 3, but here I am now. I recently rediscovered my notes for this part, which is set back in motion work on this video, so it took a little while to get here, but it is finally here. But with this release comes some negative news if you like these videos, because I believe this will be the last part to this series. Unless some drastic inspiration hits me to start a Part 4, I do believe this will be the last part to the series. It's just really hard to keep managing to talk about EU that very few people are aware of. And plus, I'm already beginning a new series which is similar in style to this that I plan to do for a long time. Random EU lore videos see me just talk about random EU facts and tidbits from the lore. The first couple videos are already up, so as I close the door to this series, those videos are sort of a spiritual successor to this style of video, just with a more open narrative. With that long intro out of the way, here finally is what I believe to be the final part to the series. The Felon are a feline sentient species from Helith 4 that was introduced in Roleplayer Independent number 8. Which was a 1993 British RPG magazine. It included a tiny bit of Star Wars material in its 8th issue, which is why it's noteworthy. The article by John Crane introduced this truly obscure species to the EU, with a bit of info about the species. And that's the only place they have shown up so far. Truly an obscure species in my opinion. Next up is the Angry Machine, a device that was utilized by a being of an unidentified species, the being known as Wikyachi. And Wikyachi, if you're wondering who that is, was an alien designed by 11-year-old Aaron Reeder, and it was published in issue number 7 of Galaxy magazine. Though never referenced again in the EU, Leland Chi stated it was considered EU canon. And what exactly did the Angry Machine do, you ask? Well, it was actually a device that calmed down the alien's temper tantrums when he had them. Wikyachi was designed as a mashup of Chewbacca, Yoda, and Wicket, and honestly, this design rocks. Wish we'd got more info on the species Wikyachi belongs to, and man, if only Ryder Wyndham had referenced the Angry Machine in some source book or something. Some obscure, wacky, but 100% canon EU. You know, you gotta love it. At least I do. Now we will discuss a frozen planet called Charity that appeared in an RPG story titled As Cold as Charity. The RPG outlined the planet and gave some super in-depth information about the seasons, local tribes, and their migrating patterns, and even the starports on the planet. We even learned from the scenario about the planet's relationship to smugglers and the Empire, and kind of its place in the galaxy. The planet was only ever mentioned in one magazine issue, another Roleplayer Independent issue from Britain, this one being from issue number 3. Next up to talk about, we have the character Ran Thrackan, who is a Jedi only mentioned in Inquest Gamer number 70, an RPG magazine that occasionally published new Star Wars content. The character is a Jedi who wielded 2 lightsabers and 2 blasters. Very cool. The character's master was killed by Darth Maul, and he dedicated his life to killing the Sith. I like to think personally his quest would eventually lead him to Vader several years later and he would be killed, but that's headcanon. But undeniably this character truly is obscure. Next we have Tu An, who is a Jedi Master who was killed on Utapau during the Clone Wars. Her sole appearance were in 3 unfinished TCW reels, which were known as the Clone Wars Legacy reels. The episodes she appeared in were part of the Crystal Crisis on Utapau arc. These episodes are really obscure because new Disney canon didn't finish or adapt them into Season 7, basically making them only EU TCW episodes. Who'd have thought? Tu An is as obscure a character as you can find, due to the episodes she appeared in being rough unfinished episodes that are extremely hard to find watchable copies of online. Now let's briefly discuss another random character from Star Wars Galaxy's MMO game. The character is named QQ463, and whilst you might expect this character to be a droid or something. He's actually a human male Imperial scout trooper. What a random and unnoteworthy character. Pretty obscure to me. The Sipsk Ud, or what we'll talk about next, and it's just this hilarious looking insectoid avian species. It was seen in like 3 panels, like not even more than that, of one issue of one Star Wars comic. The issue being Classic Star Wars The Early Adventures number 7, which collected a newspaper strip called Bring Me the Children, quite an ominous name. The species wasn't named in the comic until the short story Death in the Slave Pits of Lord by Adric Tolliver, who gave the species a name. The species would be mentioned briefly a final time in Abel G. Pena's masterpiece of continuity, the novella Lone Wolf, A Tale of Obi-Wan and Luke. And if you haven't read that yet, what are you doing? Go read Lone Wolf. It is so good. Next to talk about, we have an obscure creature, the Boarheck, which is a beast used in gladiator arenas. Jango Fett actually fights one in the Bounty Hunter video game, in the opening to the game, which is the creature's only appearance in the EU. So it's a visually cool species, in my opinion. A shame we never got to see more of it in the EU, but because we didn't, it remains obscure and perfect for this video. Second to last, we have a Jedi Master named Zamir Bothu, who appears on 2 pages of issue number 1 of the General Grievous comic. She is this fill-in Jedi Master for the main character of the comic, who's this brash Jedi named Flynn Kaibo, but we never saw the character Zamir Bothu again beyond like maybe a dozen panels or less. She's truly an obscure Jedi who I would have loved to know more about. Like, I think the design for this character looks really, really cool. Finally, we have the one, the only, Bob. Bob is a hilarious-looking Zabrak with a legendary name who participated in the Ewoks Festival of Love. His only appearance is in the MMO game Star Wars Galaxies. What a legend. And with that, thus ends part 3, and probably the final part of this series. Hope you enjoyed the obscure lore in this video, and in the others, and hopefully you'd never heard of anything from this part. But it's unlikely there will be a part 4, because I was really racking my brain to try to come up with stuff for part 3. But if you'd like to see more stuff like this, and I never make a part 4, make sure to check out the random bits of lore videos that I'm doing, because I'm planning to do lots of those. I mean, the EU is so expansive that I could literally do 100 of those episodes. And they're just 5 minutes, so they're short, they're fun. Yeah, but I had fun making these obscure Star Wars EU info videos. In fact, part 1 was my first EU video that I made when I returned to the channel after like a year-long hiatus. So it's kind of a cool video because it was one of the first ones I made, you know, getting back into the kind of flow of things on YouTube. So I enjoyed making these videos, but yeah, I'm going to have a hard time coming up with anything else, so it's unlikely we will ever see a part 4. But thanks to everyone who watched, and hopefully you didn't know any of that obscure EU information.